Let's get into a discussion about social etiquette, social skills, how to be enjoyable to other people. When it comes to carrying your own weight, we like using being a middle or middling. These qualities, in our opinion, will give you a very good shot at playing middle. At dinner parties specifically. So if there's like a dining room setting, a bunch of people have to sit down. If you qualify for these qualities, you can sit in the middle. You'll be able to like pull everything together and make sure it's like a fun evening for everyone. Okay. You are charming, witty, and quick. That's one. You're going to have to be able to tell jokes or at least respond to someone else's quip or joke quickly and efficiently. Don't take up too much time.
Yeah, that's why I'm not actually the best middle.
You bring up topics that everyone at the table can feel included in. I don't like it when people start a conversation that only 4 out of 7 of the people will understand. It's also important to speak clearly, loud enough. And if you're in a group of like 6+ people, keep it to 30 seconds. Unless, of course, you're telling a story and you've been given full consent by everyone to hog the airtime.
So I'm guilty. I'm a rambler. Lord, I was born a rambling man.
Everyone has been guilty of doing some sort of social faux pas at some point. It's unavoidable unless you have like perfect emotional intelligence and high social intelligence, I guess.
I mean, obviously, we're all guilty of it, but some of us are more guilty than others. I think a good ramble, if you're funny, like I don't mind going down, like taking the whole journey with somebody if they're telling, like if they're a good storyteller, right?
Totes.
Are we missing any qualities for the middle?
I think we basically got it. So why don't we talk about what makes good small talk? Number one, ask a question that has the right blend of broad and general with one or two, or maybe even more, but just stick with one specific element of that topic. So bonus points for asking something so granular and niche that it makes you appear more memorable to them in their minds, right? I find if people ask good questions, it makes you more memorable in the long run to that person. We have so many mundane conversations, we just immediately delete that person. We erase them. Here's an example of a question that would qualify as having the right blend of broad and general with one specific element that you pinpoint. How does the BBQ in Southern Texas compare to the BBQ in Kansas City? So that's small talk. But instead of saying, how's the food in LA, you chose one specific type of cooking and you're saying, how does it, oh, you've been to both these places, you've lived in both, blah blah blah, how do they compare? Because then they could tell you this one time they went to this barbecue restaurant and the line was really long, but by the time they got up and they got their treats and meats and eats, they were happy and then they met the love of their life and blah, blah, blah. And then that leads to that conversation. And then all of a sudden, you're best friends. It makes it easier for people to go down different tangents of interest. Another good small talk approach is, why don't you tell me about an interesting project you're working on that is within like my field of interest or our shared interest field. So it's like, oh, you like cars? I like cars too. What do you think of the new Ford E350 XLT 15 passenger? Oh, well, after 2018, blah, blah, blah. So, like, do you see what I'm saying? That's like
Mm-hmm.
good small
Mm-hmm.
talk. So I watched a TED talk about small talk. These are the thoughts I came away with from that video. He was saying that questions such as, how do you like the weather in LA? It feels too scripted and it creates a feeling of predictable superficiality. I thought that term really stood out. Predictable superficiality. There were certain questions that were off limits that you weren't allowed to ask. And, you know, he makes this point that deeper conversations help us find more meaning and importance in our lives. And I think that's true.
Yeah, I agree. It's better to have deeper conversations with strangers than it is to just like, how's the weather? It's kind of a waste of everybody's time
Yeah.
because it doesn't get anywhere. It
And
doesn't do anything.
yeah, one single encounter with someone can like change your life forever, which is why it's so important to ask the right questions. I think it's why being boring is so detrimental to both you and the person who has to experience your boringness. So they make some other points that I found really interesting. First of all, they say compliments. 3 things you can compliment them on: their work, their energy, or a platonic compliment. Like, oh, those are nice earrings.
Uh huh.
Oh, I really like your movie. Your energy is just so magnetic or infectious.
That's a nice one.
So here is a mistake someone can make.
Uh huh.
Your compliment is too sexual.
Big mistake. Right off the top.
or you make a compliment that you don't mean. Now, this one's tough because you want to, if someone's showing you their work, something they've worked really hard on,
Mm-hmm.
you want to say something nice. You want to say, like, oh, I really like the drum part, or like, wow, the bass is really beefy. Like, there's a lot of nice things you could say, even if in your heart of hearts, you're like, yeah, I would never listen to this. Or you know what I mean? In
Yeah,
my case, music, but I'm sure this is super true in like the film world and the TV world. And
I think there's definitely ways to do it. I mean, infamously on my mom, when she went to go eat food at my step grandmother's, she said that the food tasted clean. And everybody on that side of the family is always like, ha, isn't that so funny? Oh my God, that's such a weird word to choose for food. That's not an adjective you'd use for food. But I'm like, low key, my mom is throwing shade and she's saying that your shit is bland and dry. But she
it's not
found
true.
something nice to say within that, and she said clean tasting. And
Yeah.
I think that's very clever because
Yeah.
it was kind, but it was still throwing shade, but they were too white to see it.
So when you're making a compliment, you don't want to stay on the compliment for too long. I want to tell a very quick story that really illustrates this point. So I was at an improv concert at Zebulon in Los Angeles, California. It was like an improv show. Dustin Wong was playing
Okay.
guitar and he had some friends playing. It was
Very
great.
fun. Sounds very chill, very
And
cool.
we're all hanging out outside. There's like two groups of friends kind of clustering adjacent to each other. And this guy goes up to Dustin Wong and is complimenting him for way too long. Like
Ooh,
it was
cringe.
like very awkward and cringe and very like I feel I did feel a little bad for him because I could tell he hadn't socialized in a while because of COVID. Like he was just
Oh,
all locked up and
yeah.
and but he like
It's a bit
here's the worst
much.
part though. So I was talking to Dustin at this point.
Uh huh.
I was actually telling him about Shmoo TV and how I'd like to have him on as a musical guest. But anyway, so his friend who's over complimenting him looks at me and he's like, right? Wasn't he so great? I mean, he does this thing and he does that thing. And I'm just like, oh my God, stop, dude. And Dustin felt so uncomfortable that he was like, excuse me, I just have to go say bye to those people, which he didn't need to. If the conversation was good, of course, he would have stayed. But this guy just absolutely threw a fucking bomb into like him and I were having a great conversation. And this guy was just like, hey, can I fuck up the vibe, basically? And then Dustin left me with Bomb Man, the bomb thrower, and he still kept going on and on. And I humored him for another 25 seconds, and then I had to walk away because I was like, I'm sorry, you're now being selfish. You're now being like you're being indulgent. You want me to indulge in your bad social skills, and I'm only willing to do that for a certain amount of time before I'm like, okay, I don't know you. You haven't even introduced yourself to me. You haven't given me a good reason to even be interested to know you.
I'm like sympathetic to I feel like, but I also end up giving up a lot of my time and energy
Exactly.
because I'm like, oh, I understand where you're at, and like,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there, oh my,
I have a
even,
boundary. I have a
you have a
boundary.
hard boundary with that, and I'm like,
Yeah,
I have a very weak, permeable boundary where I'm like,
yeah.
everybody deserves my love and time. Let me hold space for everybody, but that doesn't actually like work for my energy all the time. It's actually not the smartest.
Listen, I feel bad for him, but he also absolutely
Wasn't
failed.
reading the room,
Yeah, at doing the correct things
not reading
socially.
the room at all, taking up too
Oh,
much
and
time,
his compliment went on too long. And so
compliments too much.
what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to transition smoothly and quickly into the second part of the conversation, which is it reminds me of then you could say the Beatles or the time I went to Spain or blah blah blah. Oh, you went to Spain? Now you're at sea. Now
What
you
if it
talk
doesn't
about
remind you
Spain.
of anything?
You could say I've never heard anything like it. Your originality it reminds me of like it reminds me of is just one example of how to segue into the second part of the conversation.
I agree. I was just trying to throw you a curveball because I was like, I just wanted to pitch you a real fast one, see if you could catch
How
it.
did I do?
You did pretty good. You did good. Not annoyed. You caught the ball.
I'm
You
not
caught.
annoyed after
You're
all.
not annoyed. You caught the social ball. I threw you a quick social ball and
Yeah,
you caught it.
I caught it. Did I
You
throw it
caught it.
back?
You threw it right back.
Wow.
Pitched it right back. Good job.
That's what you're supposed to do. You can compliment, but don't stay on it too long unless they want to talk about themselves. Unless they're like,
Unless they're
yeah,
enjoying
yeah.
it. They're like, yeah, tell me more about me, baby.
Okay, the next point is lateral thinking. Like, here's a bunch of facts, here's the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the question leads to other ideas that's divergent. I'm more of a divergent thinker, I think. But anyway, who cares?
Who cares?
Um,
You know what I am? I'm a stinker thinker.
Next one is people are not excited to answer mundane questions. Okay, if you have a crib and it's like I and you're like, here's a picture of my crib and the picture is just I and like there's nothing impressive or like it's just mundane, maybe don't send that text. Maybe just like you could just invite the person over when you feel comfortable meeting them and then maybe then they could just see your place instead of sending a photo. Do you see what I'm getting at? Like why would someone do that?
It's like the sharing of the pet photos and stuff like that, or talking about your animals
Exactly.
or your children without
Yeah,
it being brought up.
that's what I mean. It's
You're
like,
just like,
here's my
here's this
house.
thing.
It would be one thing if there was like a poster, like here's a picture of my man cave, which is more specific than just house,
It is
right?
specific.
Man cave, and
I
then there's
still would.
a Pink Floyd poster, and then the other person's like, "Whoa, Floyd, bro, yeah." That's a back and forth. But if you're just like, here's a picture of my ex-wife, imagine that. No one wants to see that shit. Oh, just to branch off that one, when someone tells you a story about like, well, my ex-wife and I went to blah blah blah, you don't need to mention ex-wife.
Yeah, you
You
don't need to tell us that you went there with your ex-wife.
you don't. You can just
Unless it's
tell the
somehow
story.
pertinent to the story, like because she's an integral part of the story. You don't need to say that when I was
Exactly.
on vacation with my ex-wife. You could just say when I was on vacation.
Exactly right.
I think it's difficult for a lot of people though to live in the present and to like readjust that way. It's a communication thing. It's a
Yeah.
odd, stodgy.
Now, the only exception to when people are excited to answer your mundane questions is if they have a crush on you or maybe they met you before and they're like, "Oh, I like this person." Maybe the way that you have the mundane conversation has like a humor to it. Oh, it's silly, right? That's different.
But that's
Like when Tom Green goes, "Cheese sandwiches, sliced cheese sandwich." It's funny because it's so dumb.
yeah. But
He's making fun of the mundanity. Is that the word? Mundanity?
mundane titties. Yeah, no, it's a different vibe. But you would need to be able to read the room and read the vibe to be able to do that and execute that, right? That's part of that social intelligence. But I mean, yeah, different communication styles. Not everybody is meant to be in the middle of the table, and not everybody knows how to get out of the bad convos.
So asking why questions is a good method because it allows people to explore and discover a deeper level quicker. Kind of
Okay.
expedites like, why do you think this? Why did you move to France? Right? You're getting to a deeper question. Ask a question that is fun to answer because then conversations can go in wild directions. I love asking you goofy questions.
Yeah.
Okay, another technique that this Charisma on Command video is recommending is mirroring. Repeat the last 1 to 3 words that they say back to them. However, you should stay true to your own voice and your own style. You don't need to like talk like them or like if they're talking like this, you don't have to talk like this back, right?
But you could be like, oh, so what I should do in a conversation is mirror somebody where I repeat the last like 1 to 3 words, but use my own voice.
Adam Sandler's cool.
Adam Sandler is definitely interesting.
That's you responding to Adam Sandler's cool question mark.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we can get to the do nots. Let's do more do nots. We're not talking about date focused. We're not talking about mate poaching. We're just talking about first time social interactions with a stranger. Do not discuss your child. This is meaning someone especially for the first time. Do not ask a question about how they like a city, and this is more true the bigger the city. So if you live in Tokyo and you're like, how do you like Tokyo? Shut the fuck up. That's a ridiculous question. Tokyo's disgustingly big and there's like a million.
It's a very open-ended question.
Yeah.
It's a lazy question. It's not
Very easy.
it's not a bad question, it's a lazy question that puts the effort on the other person. You just lumped the whole conversation weight onto the other person, doing very minimal lifting of your own.
Next, ask generally, not just how their career is doing, but more broadly, how the field in which their career exists is doing. So do not ask a question like, how's comedy? If that was like, let's say you were a full-time stand-up comic. Have you seen Andrew Santino live? That would be a specific comedy question.
That's a specific comedy question.
Give me the weed. Pass me a